How do Alberta's tech entrepreneurs turn big ideas into reality when specialized resources or expertise at times feel out of reach? Across the province, cutting-edge facilities are bridging the gap between ambition and execution, helping businesses innovate, grow, and tackle challenges. Today, we'll explore how these resources are helping to empower Alberta's innovation ecosystem and driving economic growth. Sit back, settle in. Welcome to Shift. Today, my guest is Ken Doyle, Executive Director of TACs Canada, the national not-for-profit organization representing Canada's 67 TACs. Now, what's a TAC? Well, a TAC is a Technology Access Center. And those centers, their mission is to lead applied research professionals at these TACs to achieve excellence in developing innovative solutions for businesses across Canada. Tech Access Canada is passionate about expanding the reach of its member TACs, making their research and development support and technology adoption services accessible to all entrepreneurs and innovators across Canada, thereby contributing to a more inclusive innovation economy. Ken, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be on the podcast, John.
You and I, we first met at one of the Alberta Innovation Network meetings, and that was the first time I'd really been exposed to the idea of these technology access centers and Technology Access Canada writ large. So why don't we dive in, and I'll get you to explain what tech access centers do and their purpose in the innovation landscape in Alberta and nationally in Canada.
Absolutely. So Technology Access Centers, or TACs, are specialized R&D centers affiliated with colleges across the country. And they're set up as a public good. And their role is to provide access to cutting-edge equipment, facilities, and more importantly, the smart people that know how to use those to solve company problems, particularly to help small and medium-sized Canadian companies who don't have in-house R&D capacity to solve their business innovation challenges. And the TACs really have two mandates. One of them is to provide that applied R&D support, refining a prototype, getting a company's widget closer to commercialization, or help that same company with technology adoption, so adopting emerging enabling technologies to be more innovative and productive on the shop floor. And Tech Access Canada, like you mentioned, we're a small not-for-profit based in Ottawa. We've been around since 2016, and we really, as an organization, have initially two core mandates: one, to share best practices between the 67 centers to get them up to a common level of service excellence, and then also to raise awareness that TACs exist and encourage small Canadian companies to come work with them. And then over time, we've inherited a bit of a third mandate where we're, because we've got a merit-based curated group of business innovation service providers, we're able to run small-scale demonstration projects for provincial and federal government departments and agencies using the TACs as a service providers, helping the client companies of these programs with their innovation challenges. And you mentioned asked about the relevance to Alberta's innovation ecosystem. You look at Alberta, there's 175,000 companies, and you're already the most productive province in Canada, which is awesome. But Canada's overall productivity is terrible and have been in decline for 40 years. So, Alberta company R&D expenditures, tech adoption rates still leave much to be desired, and they need these business innovation support services, if not the same or more than the rest of Canada. And Alberta also has very strong colleges and polytechnics across the province. So there's 8 TACs in Alberta at present, and Alberta punches above its weight in accessing funding from federal R&D support programs for these colleges. But these TACs are also operating beyond capacity. So they have long wait lists of companies that want to work with them. And I'm here because I want to help bridge that gap. So if the TACs had the capacity to meet this existing demand, the innovation and commercialization outputs for Alberta companies would increase, further improving the productivity lead against the other provinces. Now, I can't help bridge that gap till there's acknowledgement that things could be improved. But being in first place is nice, but complacency is a killer. So it's we're not even getting into discussion about Alberta or Canada's rankings against international competitors, but it's not good news.
Wow. Okay. So that's heavy for sure. You mentioned something interesting that I'd read today. A word that we're hearing a lot of is productivity. and how Canada is ranking really low in terms of productivity. Can you just define that for our listeners a little bit so they have a better sense of what that means?
Yeah, it's a policy wonk-ish term that has become a catch-all for everything like innovation or skills. Productivity is effectively the amount of economic output for every hour of input. So, somebody working a task and, creating products, what's the value of those products for every hour put in versus people who may be using, some digital supports or some cutting edge equipment. They still have that same hour of work, but they're producing that much more value. And that's what other countries have done through tech adoption, these other things, where Canada's still, by and large, an analog country doing things the same way we have for decades, which is impacting our productivity rankings.
I see. Okay. And you mentioned another thing that I found really interesting as well. By virtue of the fact that the TACs are affiliated with those post-secondary institutes, those colleges, you can showcase this technology for government. And that's really critical in terms of adoption. So government can understand what those homegrown tools are.
Say absolutely. And for the, every company thinks their challenges are unique. But I can guarantee, the TACs work with 6,000 companies a year. Every year, they've seen it before, they've helped solve it. And for a lot of these, small Canadian companies trying to become medium-sized Canadian companies, staying in a global supply chain or a global value chain is so important. And the rest of the world is caught up and past Canada. Any study or rankings will show that. And they're hungry and they're knocking us out of these supply chains. So unless Canadian companies start adopting what's assumed as the table stakes for technologies to become just as productive and efficient as our international competitors, we're going to have a really hard deal in the next decade or so.
Now, I want to park all of this for later on in our conversation, because I'm hoping, and listeners, what I want to focus on here is get Ken to talk a bit about the TACs as he is, so you have a better understanding of what resources and supports are available to you as a tech entrepreneur and as someone that's just interested in technology. That's working in conjunction with things like our regional innovation networks and Alberta Innovates and other organizations throughout the province. But I also want to dive in kind of the second half of this. What do where we foresee technology going, from, Ken, you've got 67 different TACs working on various different things. Each one of these TACs has a specialization, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. They focus their areas of innovation expertise to enable the industrial sector of importance to their regions within an hour's drive of the TAC.
Right. So now, can you provide some examples of some Alberta companies or projects that have benefited from the Technology Access Centers?
Oh yeah, definitely. The TAC mandate is to provide the R&D support services and the tech adoption advice, and they execute that through 4 different main mechanisms: short-term technical and business services, traditional applied R&D projects, could be a few months, customized training for a company that just bought a new piece of equipment, how to integrate it into the workflow, and then technology diffusion, socializing emerging enabling technologies to companies, things that still may be 3 to 5 years away from mass adoption, given the companies in the region a head start on that. So I tried to cherry pick 3 examples. Like I said, we work with 6,000 companies a year. Cherry pick a few from Alberta without violating any NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to get myself in trouble. So, first one, we had an Alberta company came to one of the TACs, and they needed to test their nanobubble enhanced ozone system for its effectiveness as a disinfectant, so particularly in food safety applications. The TACs team did 5 laboratory experiments to validate the system's impact on bacterial loads and compared it to established methods like bleach and UV light. They suggested some tweaks, some improvements, and then the project effectively confirmed the system's effectiveness in reducing foodborne pathogens and extending the shelf life of produce, meat, and fish, which, could in theory help keep grocery prices steady or a bit lower for everybody, which would help. Another company needed help to develop a more efficient solar panel. And the TACs team researched and tested some new materials to optimize solar panel performance. And the TAC provided the company with prototypes of the new solar panels they were able to test in Canada's unforgiving climate. And they were able to increase the solar panel efficiency, which should hopefully allow greater adoption of renewable energy, try to keep those hydro bills low. At the same time, get some more made in Alberta, made in Canada solar panels out there into the market. And then a third one I kind of liked was another company that makes battery packs for different sort of transportation applications. Needed a prototype improving the exterior of their battery pack to keep it, puncture resistant using 3D printing. So the TACs team was able to create a conceptual 3D model and then machined a die to bend sheet metal for the external parts. And then so the TAC provided the company the functional prototype for testing and refinement. They were happy with that, and that'll now improve the fit, tolerances, and manufacturability of the battery packs. So they don't, now they can finally get away from 3D printing, low volume, high precision things and mass produce a model they know will work for their manufacturing process.
Wow, those are fantastic examples. Now, let's cut to the chase here, Ken. What's the cost for something like this for a business to talk to a TAC?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, every engagement is a bespoke engagement, so there's no predefined model. But no matter what the timeline or budget, there's a way to work with the TACs. I mean, if a company came in, scoped a project about shelf life testing, that kind of thing, could end up being about $32,000, takes 6 months. And the TACs, because they're connected to the colleges, they can access provincial and federal R&D support programs, maybe knock off $20,000-$25,000 of that cost through grants or other initiatives. The problem there is there's a delay between the time of applying and receiving the word you've been successful with the grant. So if the company's willing to trade off time, they can leverage that public funding to de-risk the investment in R&D. If they want to pay cash for the project, no problem. Professional R&D team starts tomorrow, be done in 6 months. And then for companies who have a real moonshot idea or maybe completely new to the R&D game, maybe a bit smaller than others, we're able to do what we call capstone projects, where under the supervision of a TAC researcher, we'll assemble a team of college, university students in sort of the last year of their program and deploy them to solve that problem over 4 or 8 months. At the end of it, they present the deliverable to the company, and the company, may be on the hook for the cost of supplies or a modest honorarium. The trade-off there is, you're getting emerging innovators and researchers rather than the professional R&D team that, paying cash fee for service would unlock. But I mean, we have engagements that last a matter of hours or days and ones that'll go 12, 18, 24 months in duration. Like I said, everything's bespoke, but we're very cognizant of two things. One, to never be perceived as unfairly competing with private sector service providers who offer similar services. We'll get out of the road and refer clients to these companies who can do it better, cheaper, quicker than we can, if it's just sort of off-the-shelf routine stuff. And the other piece is there has to be a novel aspect to any collaboration with the TAC. And we're going to charge at or above market rate for that to, again, avoid any perception of unfair competition with private sector service providers.
I see why you guys have thought of everything. So now 67 TACs. We've got 8 TACs in Alberta. What are the specializations of those TACs in Alberta?
Oh, I mean, it varies starting, down in Lethbridge into agriculture and aquaponics, up to Calgary, green building technologies for the residential and commercial construction sector. Up Olds, Alberta, it's livestock production. And then Red Deer, manufacturing innovation. In Edmonton, you've got systems and sensors integration for data analysis and big data. Up in Grand Prairie, have honeybee commercialization up in the Peace Country. Honeybee is so important to the food pyramid. Yeah. And then up in Peace River as well, you have the Boreal Forest TAC doing some incredible stuff in seeds and forestry-related initiatives up there.
Okay, so now let's say I'm a business. I forgot
one more, and it's ironic that it may be the one that most people outside of Alberta think of when they think of Alberta, but we have a center for oil and gas innovation.
That makes sense.
In Edmonton, yeah.
And to be fair, listeners, I put Ken on the spot with that. Now, there's 67 TACs, and, we always go into these conversations with a little bit of a framework script, and I immediately, right after I introduce my guests, I deviate from the script. So, but I think Ken's used to that, and he shines like a prince, as he always does. Now, Ken, let's say I'm a business, tech business in Alberta that looks at that list of Alberta TACs and goes, well, none of them are doing what I'm doing. So, do they just go, sorry, TACs aren't available to you then?
Oh no, and that's a really great point. Canada is a huge country, 1.2 million companies, and if you're an aerospace company down in southern Alberta, and your local TAC is focused on agriculture and aquaponics because that's where their core demand comes from, that's okay. Philosophically, because every single one of the 67 TACs operates the same model. College-based center, providing demand-driven innovation services and objective advice, and you keep all the intellectual property. It's a common model across the country. So the way to look at it is your local TAC is sort of the front door to the other 66 TACs. So if you just want to go meet with that TAC and then ask for a referral, they'll be able to know within the network who does aerospace or drones or whatever. That's a very human, high-touch approach. By far even easier would be to go to the Tech Access website. We have a program called Jump Ball, sort of like the beginning of a basketball game. The referee throws the ball up, whoever jumps the highest gets it. Where if you're willing to disclose, what's your innovation challenge, what have you done to resolve it, and what's your timeline, you hit submit. We have a rapid responder at each of the 67 TACs that'll get back to us within 24, 48 hours with, yes, Ken, here's how we can help. Or no, not for us, thanks. And then at Tech Access, we'll pull together a list of the 7 or 8 centers that answered in the affirmative and then provide them to you with how they can help and who wants to hear from you. Point of contact, email, cell phone number. And then from there, it's on you to reach out to one or more of the TACs and discuss a potential collaboration. Doesn't matter if they're in Quebec, Newfoundland, British Columbia, or just up Highway 2. It's all good.
So you give interested parties, those interested tech businesses, some actionable items virtually from the first point of contact.
Yeah, based on the amount of detail the company is willing to disclose in that initial inquiry, they're able to give an informed response on, okay, based on what you've said, here's what we think we could do in 3 or 4 sentences, but would like to talk more about it. And that's usually enough for the person who gets that to take a look at the responses and reach out to one or more of the centers to discuss a potential collaboration. And it's nice because you're tapping into the 67 TACs, but you're also tapping into all of their personnel and all their personnel's Rolodexes. So maybe the solution isn't at a TAC. Maybe it's at a local university because there's a lab doing X, Y, Z. The TAC will still connect you to that person, and it's on you to talk. So it's this objective matchmaking. Just try to find the solution for the problem the client has, and then wish them the best.
Wow. So now, and this kind of leads nicely into the next question, because we started this discussion off by, me talking about where I first met you at the Alberta Innovation Network meeting. And that's a group, for those of you who don't know, that comprises the 8 regional innovation networks in Alberta. Now, I know you guys work with those RINs. Talk to me a little bit about, you've mentioned the colleges that you're working with, but talk to me about how that, the Rolodex of other affiliated people. How do you work those, and who are some of those other organizations?
Oh, yeah. And Alberta has a great base of TACs already. There are annual competitions to grow the numbers. When it started off, there were only 9. Now we're 67. So we'd love to see Alberta get some more TACs on the map. And we know that the colleges and polytechnics are building out additional research centers that hopefully can win this national designation in time. But what's unique about the model is that, it's a bit late to the game. If you look at how long Canada has been doing R&D innovation at universities, the National Research Council, provincial, like the Alberta Research Council, other outfits. So we're a bit of a new kid on the block, been around for 20 years, the TAC model for just over 10. But we tried to carve out a niche space in the innovation ecosystem, and we try to stay in our lane. So we'll do the, applied R&D, the TRL 4 to 8 piece. And, like I said, we work with 6,000 companies a year. We also work with 1,000 others every year. Universities, government labs, private labs, incubators, accelerators, you name it, where we're complementary to the activities they offer their clients. And we just try to do our piece of the puzzle and then wish them well on their way. Maybe it's they need, IP advice or scale up to manufacturing, that kind of thing. There are other experts who do that, and we'll happily pass them along so their journey can continue. So great people like Alberta Innovates and their TDAs, an incredible network, just like NRC IRAP and their ITAs. So, It's something that in the early days of the network, we tried to explain to the members and to try to get their buy-in, the concept of a mutual client, where there's a lot of service providers, the innovation ecosystem, each with their sort of niche. And we're a stop along that commercialization journey. So if we get referred a company by an Alberta Innovates TDA, we're going to help them as best we can. And then we're going to wish them well on their journey because maybe the next stop is an accelerator or something like that. We're not going to try to keep that client for ourselves and, cut out the TDA from it, that kind of thing. That just doesn't work. So it's the concept of mutual client where, the TDA is working their best interest. We're working their best interest. The folks, the IP players are working their best interest. We're all trying to help this company go on their journey, succeed, and create wealth for Canada together. And it took a little bit, but now everybody's fully bought into the idea, and they're happily able to refer a company somewhere else to another service provider better able to assist them if they can't, because there's more than enough demand for the people that do fit in right into their wheelhouse.
Right. So now I want to go back for a second. You said just over 10 years that Tech Access Canada has been around. Now, you said you started with 9 Tech Access centers, and now you're at 67. That's pretty impressive growth. That's 58 within those first 10 or so years that developed. Do you see, or are you aware of any other model that's similar to the TAC way of, doing business and helping innovators across Canada? Do you see that or aware of that in any other country or jurisdiction?
Yeah, it's interesting because the TAC model it's funded mainly by the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, a federal granting council out of the College and Community Innovation Program, a small program within the wider NSERC envelope just for colleges. And there are many initiatives within that are designed to build capacity, at a college in the applied research space to build their expertise, develop a center, hone their craft. So there's many initiatives in there that are, multi-year or project-based but non-renewable. The TAC designation as Technology Access Center is meant to reward the ones who've built the capacity and capability, still have the demand, and can keep on going. There's no money for projects, just money for core operations support. And it's based on a 40-year-old model from Quebec, where it's really, this center has a mandate, a defined mandate, and as long as there's demand from companies to keep it going, then the center should keep on going. And it has to be in a constant state of evolution if it wants to get renewed every 5 years, because what you got designated as in 1987 is probably not relevant anymore in 2024. So it's sort of like the NHL playoffs: when to get in, when to stay in every 5 years. The nice part is this is a uniquely Canadian model. And we're happy to be able to take that Quebec model and then take it across the country, and wouldn't have been able to do it without that College and Community Innovation Program building capacity at the 120 eligible NSERC eligible colleges. The OECD has studied the model twice, and it is uniquely Canadian invention and innovation. We're very proud of that. The problem is other people have caught on to it, and so there are a lot of Canada is the only country in the G7 that's a net importer of IP. Everybody else creates IP, exports it abroad, and reaps the benefits. We're still an importer, and that's not great for the balance of trade deficit. Other countries in the last decade or so have gone from net importers to net exporters, and they've taken targeted measures that effectively mimic the Canadian College Applied Research system and the TAC system, because they realized, hey, we have a strong publicly supported college sector in our country. We have a whole lot of small and medium-sized companies that have R&D challenges but no in-house capacity. Maybe we can mobilize one to help the other, and then the whole country gets stronger. Brazil's done a phenomenal job. They deserve a ton of credit. And a recent thing that I saw, but a little over a couple of years ago, our friends to the south, the United States, have put $4.1 billion Canadian into creating effectively 1,000 technology access centers at their community colleges to complement the incredible work going on at government labs and their very entrepreneurial universities down there. So it was very flattering to see a lot of our language used in even the legislation in the bill, but terrifying to think that just overnight they could launch 1,000 of these centers that would dwarf our 67. So it's a neat thing. We're proud that it's a Canadian innovation that, like so many other Canadian inventions, is going to be, probably done bigger and better abroad, and then the final product sold back to us. So, I mean,
Oh,
I know, it's a spicy take, but it's just the Canadian way. So, I mean, we're modest but positive, but I mean, this model really is scalable. The demand is there.
Right. And I think you hit on something incredible, incredibly insightful, modest but positive. But there needs to be, if we're going to compete on a global scale, and we're looking at things like, quantum. There's a big press release by Google the other day about Willow, their new quantum chip. It's only a matter of time before this becomes ubiquitous, like artificial intelligence has become, like the internet before that. And in order for Canada to stay competitive or hit that benchmark of competitiveness and to increase our productivity, this is a loaded question for you, Ken. What do we have to do?
Well, expert panels have studied this for 50 years or more. I was reading a report from 1972 from the Science Council of Canada. And I mean, their recommendations you could literally copy, paste, and still use today. We've got to improve company competitiveness. I mean, and the TACs are a tool for that. We can help them quickly test, refine, implement new technologies and production methods. And when you lower that barrier to innovation, then they can streamline their operations, improve the product quality, reduce their costs. And as they get more competitive, they tend to grow. They get new market share because there's going to be laggards there, and they create more jobs. And then Canada is an incredibly talented country. I mean, look at our impact on Hollywood, the music industry, the inventions we've done. If we can shorten the timeline from idea to market, then we could, if we could just enable companies to rapidly prototype products, test them in situ, improve the process, troubleshoot the technical issues, get out to market. You cut down that time from concept to commercial product, then they can get to market faster. They generate revenue sooner, and they're supporting the local labor force with better, high caliber jobs, which could attract and retain skilled talent in Canada, not just in the skilled trades, not just PhDs, everybody in between. It's a multidisciplinary effort. And I just think we've tried some things over the last 30 years, more of the innovation push than demand pull, where, again, like I said, we've got brilliant people inventing incredible things. But as the balance of trade deficit for IP shows, maybe we're solving problems that companies don't have. And then it's unfair that we blame these companies in Canada for their lack of receptor capacity for a novel solution to a problem they may not have. But clearly other countries are solving these problems. That's why you have to be a net importer of IP just to keep the lights on. And I think maybe it's time to not completely shift things, but at least try something different that complements, our heavy investment one end of the spectrum, and then, the good commercial outcomes on the other. We've just got that valley of death of commercialization like other countries have. Just we really haven't taken steps in the right direction to address it.
Oh, okay. No, that's a very comprehensive answer, and it's given me a lot to chew on. And that valley of death you're referring to, I think, what you're saying with the tax, you guys offer a great opportunity for businesses to kind of navigate through that valley of death in conjunction with the other supports that are in place. So you guys are obviously a valuable partner in that sphere. Now, let's dive into kind of this notion of what does the future hold? This is the last podcast for 2024. We're going into 2025. There's lots of things going on, lots of things going on politically, as we all know, in North America. Lots of things going on with tech that I, kind of alluded to with quantum and AI. From your perspective, Ken, with the 67 TACs, are you seeing anything that's like making you think, watch out, this is going to be a big year for this? Let's speak about, Canada broadly, and then specifically about Alberta, if there's anything that really pops for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, things like artificial intelligence, quantum, semiconductors, additive manufacturing, precision agriculture, renewable energy, they're all hot. They've all become almost mainstream. And some of these, like, AI, semiconductors, that piece of it, I I just don't know if Canada can compete. There's other countries that have had multi-decade head starts that have, tripled down on a very niche area, and they're a world leader in it. The amount of money we're bringing to the table is adorable, but it just can't compete with the big dogs. I think what Canada has to do, and many people have said, is value add, given the nature of our companies, their size, our industrial makeup, our market. The art's going to be, having companies apply new technology to improve their operation. And some of the, whether that's reducing the input costs or finding efficiencies on the shop floor, decreasing costs is just as impactful as increasing revenue. But there may be a way to do both. And I think the two big trends I've been seeing over the last year across Canada, across the world, and I hope it grows in 2025, would be, the emergence of the circular economy and valorization. I'll touch on both of them because both have been really big in Quebec for years. And a lot of the most innovative public policy and programs I've seen in the 20 years I've been doing this start in Quebec and then make their way to the rest of Canada. If I can help, fast forward that, awesome. So, circular economy, the whole concept is basically a model of production of, widgets that emphasizes designing for their end of life and then reusing and recycling existing materials whenever possible. It's very cool. There's so many intersectoral possibilities. We've seen companies who collect the sand from winter road operations in the spring and then use them for roofing shingles, or surplus materials from the pulp and paper industry being used for bedding for cows. These kind of things, where there's so many examples out there and so many possibilities that haven't even scratched the surface. It's how do you connect those two markets together? And I think interrelated would be the concept of valorization, where it's a French term that doesn't really have an English equivalent yet, so we're just going to call it valorization because we can. But it's more about figuring out if there's commercialization potential for your waste stock. So, the excess material that's required, or, the inputs required to make your core product, at the end of it, you've got your core product on store shelves, you're making money, that's awesome. But then you have to pay somebody to come haul away the waste. Now, is there someone out there that would actually pay for it as they need it as an input for their product, completely unrelated to yours? So I think of examples of, microbreweries. Everybody loves their fine products after a hard day's work, but, they've got a lot of spent grains from brewing. So when they're used, they've got to pay somebody to come and haul it away by the ton. Could these be used to grow mushrooms as a clean feed source for the livestock industry? Well, actually, yes, I speak to exactly an example of that, where now these microbrewers have opened up a new revenue stream, where instead of paying somebody to haul away that spent grain, an entrepreneur is going to come and pay to take that off, turn it into mushrooms and do feedstock. So all these kind of things where there's like a triple bottom line benefit to them, I really see as emerging. And I just don't know how to facilitate the connections between all these different sectors, all these different companies, to see, what other potentials are out there to, and maybe that could be Canada's, distinct advantage is in that, circular economy and valorization piece, because all the industries we have, the inputs we have, all the other advanced economies around the world have them too. So if we could be the first to market with a solution for that, maybe some of that, wealth creation could trickle back here in the form of IP licensing and things like that. Okay, so circular economy and valorization, these are the emerging kind of themes that you see for 2025. Talk to me now. Let's go back, track a little bit, and talk about productivity again, and how we can improve our productivity. I know you've touched on a few points, but let's just kind of swim around in that lane for a while. What does that look like? What do we need to do? What does a business need to do from your perspective to increase their productivity kind of with the national perspective in mind? There's two tracks. One is if they have an idea for something like a new commercial concept, a new widget that they could build and commercialize because they know there's a market out there on the other end, we need to help them do that because so few companies have in-house R&D capacity. They could develop a sample at the lab bench scale, but they don't know how to get it to a point where you can create 100,000 of them. So maybe you start at that bench scale, you connect with one of the TACs, you come in with a maybe 5-inch by 5-inch sample of a membrane for a wastewater treatment sort of application. we can produce it at the lab scale and then help refine it and improve it, maybe a few batches of 2 foot by 2 foot. If it still works, then we can scale it up to the pilot scale for some real world tests, maybe do 100 kilograms of the product, refine, improve, test it, simulate it, that kind of thing. And then once we've got it, then we figure out what the formula is for scaled up production. So, once we've got that, put it on a USB stick, hand you off to somebody who wants to make a literal metric ton of that membrane material, but they don't want to touch you for orders less than that. And they're not going to do the engineering, the refining themselves, because there's no business model there. They want plug and play, big scale production. We can help with that. So you can't just go from the bench scale to full production. There's no market for that on either side. And it's a hell of a lot better to make some mistakes with a 10 kilogram batch than having 100,000 defective membranes sitting on store shelves. So we can help with that. So raising awareness in companies that, we're a public good, we exist, and we can help with that innovative idea, get it to commercialization, then protect the IP, all that piece of it. The other piece of it is technology adoption. Where, yes, you've been doing things the same way for 20, 30, 40 years. That's great. You're hitting payroll every 2 weeks. You're keeping the lights on. You've got your products in market. That's awesome. But there's probably a better, cheaper way to do exactly the same thing you're doing. And it may require investing in new technologies, a different lab layer, that kind of thing. We can help with that too with objective advice. Maybe one of your VP of manufacturing or whatever went to a trade show and was wowed by these incredible new products they have, 5-axis milling machines, all this kind of stuff, 3D printers, great. That's cool. But we can come in, figure out, who you are, what you do an assessment, scan your facility, create a digital twin of it, see if we could optimize the layout with the existing pieces you have, and then make some, informed recommendations about new equipment you could get, things you could replace, things you don't need anymore because they're obsolete, and give you that action plan. And then if you buy it, we can help with the implementation, upskill the workforce and how to use it, that kind of thing. Because there's nothing worse than folks that go to one of those trade shows, get wowed by a really shiny piece of equipment and whatnot, get that techno lust, and come back and realize, damn, they bought a Lamborghini when a used F-150 would have been perfectly fine for their operations. So that objective advice piece on either the creating the widgets or adopting technology that we're sort of uniquely positioned to handle could do a lot of good. Because, at the end of the day, we don't invent anything. We don't sell anything. We're just here to be that, bridge over the valley of death of commercialization.
I love it. So 2 themes here, listeners, is you're not alone, and kind of tongue-in-cheek techno-lust. I haven't heard that expression before, but I'm going to probably use that now every day. Ken, if you were to compare Alberta to the other jurisdictions in Canada, what does it look like?
Like I mentioned, Alberta #1 in productivity, strong GDP per capita, which is great, except, Canada's a laggard in the OECD. So it's like, being the best player in your Timbits hockey team. That's cool. You go up against Connor McDavid, you're going to get smoked. So it's awesome. Alberta is leading the country in all these things. One of the fortunate parts of my job is I get to bounce around the country, see all the things going on, chat with the different provincial governments, get a lay of the land, if you will. So I see, the Alberta innovation ecosystem is very tight. It's got all the right pieces of the puzzle. It's functioning well-ish. But other provinces, are catching on. I mean, Quebec, for instance, their goal as a province, their minister recently retired, Minister Fitzgibbons, Minister of Innovation, incredibly insightful gentleman. And his goal was to have Quebec catch up to Ontario as far as productivity within 5 years. And he, created policies and programs to enable that, to benefit, Quebec companies in the province to catch Ontario. And Ontario, frankly, is right now a little bit stuck in neutral, being a bit complacent. And I don't know if they even see Quebec coming for them. And this isn't tells a school. I mean, Mr. Fitzgibbons would say this in public all the time. So they're catching up. And then, we realize once you catch Ontario, well, the next stop's Saskatchewan, and then they're coming for the crown. So maybe 10 years from now. But like I mentioned earlier, complacency's killer. So, the Alberta innovation ecosystem, it's doing great. The private sector involvement, very strong compared to other regions, which is great. And I think a lot of people would be surprised in the rest of the country by the diversity of the industrial sectors that are engaged in innovative activities in Alberta, not just oil and gas, which is the stereotype. I mentioned, the areas of expertise of our centers, and it's very diverse. Only one supporting oil and gas, even though, the technologies they have can be applied horizontally to other industrial sectors. If I take an objective look at it, some of the innovation supports are, maybe a bit middle of the pack or maybe due for a refresh. A lot of it still feels a bit 1990s, early 2000s vibes. And, a bit more of a focus on innovation push rather than demand pull, and then chastising industry for the lack of receptor capacity. So I think there's some ways to freshen up the mix a little bit, and literally cherry pick some of the neat, novel things going on in other parts of the country to keep, at the top of the podium, because the other provinces, some of them are facing burning platform moments where they're, population decline, business is stagnant. There's no out other than investing in technology just to keep things going. So I think you could, keep the top of the podium and then grow and further gap the rest of the provinces, and then maybe start, credibly looking at dethroning some of the international competitors that are light years ahead of the rest of Canada.
I like that. I like that metaphor of dethroning. Wow. I think it's when you look Canada, when you look at the national innovation landscape, like having that healthy internal competition only strengthens the country. To then go on and look at some of those international players and go, hey, I think we can do this too. So let's have a healthy competition. It's almost like that sorority or fraternal competition. Good, go for it. Try to be the best. Try to dethrone Alberta. Alberta should be shooting harder to get even better. And moving forward, and then we can attack in a congenial way other countries and their productivity.
You only get better by playing better opponents, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Ken, I think this is great. There's a lot of really great information here, I think, for people to seriously consider and go, we've got these resources in the province that are attached to these, and you're using the word receptor a couple of times, so I'm going to steal it from you, these receptors in other provinces to kind of, help businesses grow and help strengthen them. So I'm a small business tech entrepreneur. What's the first thing I should do right now when I finish listening to this podcast?
Well, I'd probably recommend you go to the Tech Access Canada website, check out the resources section. We've got a guide for industry that we wrote last year, and it's sort of a self-assessment where industry is the core audience. It explains the roles, responsibilities, and expectations for the industry partners and the technology access centers about what a collaborative R&D project is going to look like, or any sort of engagement, so that before you have that first in-person meeting where you get down to business, sign your non-disclosure agreements, and talk freely about your innovation challenges, you'll have a better idea of what this whole collaborative R&D thing looks like. Because it's not like university research, it's not like private sector R&D. It's a little bit different. So first step, read that, and if you see yourself reflected in it, or you're like, okay, yeah, we have the wherewithal inside our company to do this, and then no matter what the results are, implement them to grow and scale, that'd be awesome. And then the second step is, okay, let's find a TAC who can help you do the jump ball thing. Like I said, tacjumpball.ca, put that in there. We'll do the matchmaking, and then from there, there's a variety of initiatives, just like our interactive visits program is a great one. It's supported by our friends at NRC IRAP. Very, very successful program. And it's simple. It's 20 hours of collaboration between the company and one of the technology access centers to, smooth out a wrinkle, get objective advice, get some technical services, that kind of thing. It's a great program. Unfortunately, it's only open to IRAP companies, and it exhausts the funding pretty much every year in the first couple of months. But we'd love to have like an Alberta specific version of the program open to all Alberta firms, where that introductory engagement and de-greening, are you going to be a good fit for the TACs as an R&D partner? Are they going to be a good service provider to you? Then after that, we've seen incredible impacts and outcomes from these interactive visits. So that'd be your first step before getting into a more intensive R&D collaboration sort of project engagement with the TACs.
Ken, this is great. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, entirely my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us today on Shifts. On behalf of everyone here, I'm John Hagan. You can find us online at shift.albertainnovates.ca or at any one of those fine streaming services out there. Have a good one.